Hey, Shawn Coleman.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us for our next Spirit Uncensored event that's coming up on October 11th at 5 p.m. Pacific. I really wanted to bring you on because as a consent educator, you were, when we met, we're prayer partners. And so we connected once for prayer. And you told me that you had just gotten this inspiration around both the term, Uridic consent, but also this realization that living in an era of COVID, that we are redefining what boundaries and consent look like for us. So can you talk to people a little bit about what they can expect for our conversation coming up on October 11th?
Yes. Yeah, consent is just so incredibly important. It's important that people feel like they can safely say no and be honored and respected in that. And that feels incredibly important to practice on a regular basis in terms of saying no and hearing and seeing that, we can be respected in that way. And it is especially important during these times of COVID because for a lot of us, our boundaries are changing. There are people who we used to hug every single time we saw them, especially when we went to our spiritual centers and stuff, like getting all of those hugs on Sunday was just so lovely. But now things are shifting and changing. And for many of us, it's no longer a healthy thing for us to get those hugs. And we want to make sure that we're respecting the boundaries of the folks who don't want those hugs anymore as well. And so that's something that's shifting, something that's changing. Whereas consent is something that's often thought of as stagnant. It's something that's pretty much had the same definition for decades and decades and decades, and that typically doesn't change very often unless the huge cultural shift happens. Now, uridic consent is a term that I downloaded a few weeks ago, and it ties into
Let's clarify that downloaded means that Shawn's consciousness was open to receive wisdom, and it came, and Shawn rolled with it.
Yes, thank you. Spirit woke me up in the middle of the night with the term uridic, which in my conscious mind had never heard of before. But that term means rooted in discovery or creation. And I had to look it up because I was not aware of it. And immediately once I looked it up, I was like, oh, this needs to be tied into consent, because consent needs to be acknowledged as something that doesn't have to be stagnant, something that doesn't have to stay the same, something that can shift and change as our culture changes and as our needs change. So as we, interact with folks in a different way because of COVID, because of our changing needs, because of our health needs, because of our emotional needs, we get to shift and change our boundaries. We get to understand what we need for self-care, and we get to demand new things from the people around us in terms of what they ask permission for and in terms of how they get consent from us.
So on October 11th, coming out day at 5 p.m. Pacific, we will be talking about how people can identify these boundaries for themselves and really lean into self-care and have an expectation of others honoring those boundaries, correct?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Correct. It's about definition of consent that's empowered.
Yes, I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm so grateful that you are joining us to really help inspire people to understand the importance of boundaries and also understand the importance of honoring, respecting others' boundaries. So I invite you to join us all then on Zoom. Link is on our website at spirituncensored.org/events.